A soldering iron and a roll of solder bought at the dollar store. What could possibly go wrong? It's definitely not something you expect to find there, but today I happened to see this Telstar premium quality 45-watt soldering iron on the rack at the dollar store for $2. And yes, here in the United States of America, the L is silent. If you don't like that, then send your complaints to Daniel Webster 200 years ago. Used for electrical crafts, electronic wiring, ... It was made in China by Wheeze Beyond Products Corporation of Passaic, New Jersey. Although I noticed on the packaging it says 45 watts, while on the receipt it only says 40 watts. And here's the matching Telstar TL3334 1.6mm electrical solder with one too many L's in there for electronics and electrical wiring. High quality. And on the front of the package they show the image of the matching soldering iron, which I did get. Fits Telstar TL3333. So it's like they're specifically branding this as matching that soldering iron. So hopefully they'll work very well together. And on the back it says it's rosin core lead-free solder wire. So you won't get your daily dose of PB from this. And the solder cost $1.25, which is pretty much the new baseline price at dollar stores. They don't actually sell anything for only $1 anymore. I bought a soldering iron that looked almost identical to this at a dollar store about 20 years ago. And it did work, but the handle got uncomfortably hot to the touch because you can see how thin it is. That's not really a lot of room between the heating element and where your fingers are supposed to go. And eventually, after I used it a couple times and left it on for a while, the plastic actually started melting. So we'll see if that happens with this one. I know it's only drawing 45 watts, but this power cord is very thin and there's no strain relief at the end of the handle. Plus there's rough bits of the plastic molding sticking out. So definitely not a high quality manufacturing process. And I've never had much luck with lead-free solder, so we'll see how I fare with this one. Just your typical plastic tube, and it is rather thin, very flexible. Of course, it doesn't come with any of the accessories you'll want to have, like a soldering stand, a damp piece of sponge to wipe the tip, and flux, so you'll need to provide your own. So I just plugged it in a few seconds ago, and we'll see how long it takes to warm up. Well, that's kind of a problem. The handle is so thin it just falls right into my stand. So I have to prop it up like that. Okay, it's about 2 minutes later. I'm seeing smoke coming out of the middle part here, which I don't know if it's a good sign. I don't know if this tip is even hot enough to tin yet, so let's try that. Yeah, it's kind of working. It's not really melting the solder yet, though. Because all the smoke is coming out of the middle part here. So this thing could be a dud right out of the package. See, it's making the solder produce... Oh, there it goes. Took a while, but now it finally melted the solder and deposited some of it on the tip. So it's actually a bit too much. Let me see if I can actually do some soldering with this. Here's a very simple first test. Soldering together 2 pieces of wire. Well, that's a cold solder joint, but it did solder the wires together. See, that's the problem I've always had with lead-free solder. It loves to make cold solder joints. I think this thing is going to be an exercise in frustration. Because there's a lot of solder there. It's just not flowing well. You see that cloudy look? It's not shiny. That's a cold solder joint. So that's no good. Okay, this time I twisted the wires together and I'm going to add flux. So, second try. You can hear the flux burning off. I'm trying to do it the proper way where you heat the wire and then the wire itself melts the solder instead of using the iron to directly melt the solder. And we'll see if this works. Because if this thing is truly a 45-watt iron, it really should be able to do this. Should be no problem. The solder is just coming off in chunks. It's not even melting, it's just breaking off. So I may have to abandon this dollar store solder and switch to the good stuff. Because this is just not cutting it. Yeah, I'm giving up on this solder. It's no good. Here's some old-fashioned 6040 leaded solder, and look how much better it works. As soon as I touch it to the tip, poof, it melts instantly. So let's try to do this the right way again. Heating up the wire and then using the wire to melt the solder. And yep, it's melting and it's flowing and it's making a nice solder joint, and it's not a cold solder joint, so that's a success. Here's a closer view. No flux on this. Heating up the wire, then touching the solder to the wire and using the wire to melt the solder instead of the iron. There it goes. Beautiful. I know it's hard to tell with all the reflections, but that definitely is a good solder joint. You can see how the solder wicked itself into all the little strands of the wire. That's what you want to see. Not just coated on top of the wire, it's going into the wire. So this $2 soldering iron ended up working fine. It was a little disconcerting at first when it started smoking out of the center here, but after a few minutes that stopped. And it was fine from that point on. The handle did not get uncomfortably hot to the touch, nor did it melt, even though I had it on almost continuously for, I'd say, almost half an hour. But just as I suspected, this lead-free solder is complete garbage. Maybe it works for things like surface mount components, I don't know. But for soldering wires, it just doesn't cut it. You gotta use the good stuff. Old-fashioned 60% tin, 40% lead solder. But if you're gonna use this stuff, you should exercise the proper precautions. Avoid breathing in this smoke and wash your hands after using it, because lead is not a good thing to ingest. Although I find it ironic that the packaging of the soldering iron has a California Prop 65 warning on it, probably because the plastic insulation of its power cord may contain a trace amount of lead. So maybe they should have put some of that lead into the solder they're selling.